Peyton Manning tells us he's rooting for family over alma mater when Texas plays Tennessee early this season. Is that the right move?
You are Locked On SEC, your daily podcast on the Southeastern Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's happening, everybody? I'm Chris Gordy. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The biggest stage in world soccer is here. Let there be goals on FanDuel. Visit FanDuel.com to get started today. All right, today's show, we will get to the latest in SEC recruiting. A&M continues to load up with 4 stars and 5 stars. It's insane. We'll get to that coming up in segment 2. Also, a couple of SEC basketball nuggets in our final segment, including Todd Golden not going anywhere. But first, we got to start with the news from the last couple of days. We were down in Louisiana, Thibodaux to be exact, at the Manning Passing Academy. Always a tremendous event, always first class when it comes to the Mannings, and was a great time had down there. Of course, always a great time to be around the big-time college quarterbacks that many, of the SEC great quarterbacks down there, and we were able to catch up with some of them. We're going to bring you some of those interviews throughout this week. We talked with Kenny Minchie from Kentucky, Kamaro Taylor from Mississippi State, Trinidad Chambliss, John Mateer, among others. So look for those conversations throughout the week here on Locked On SEC. But I want to start with the Mannings themselves. Obviously, they have garnered a lot more headlines these last couple of years with Peyton and Eli both being retired. But now the kids coming into play, and Cooper's son, to be exact, Arch Manning, who was, of course, one of the top quarterback recruits out there and ended up at the University of Texas. And now as the entrenched starter there for the Longhorns, started all last season and starting this season. And as we start to look at the schedule, it came out a couple of weeks ago, we start to look at some of the fun matchups. And one that kind of caught my eye, of course, is that September 26th, week 4, early in the season, a matchup in Knoxville as the Texas Longhorns will play at the Tennessee Volunteers. And it's going to be an early kickoff, a 12 noon Eastern game. But it's interesting because just two summers ago at the Manning Passing Academy, I caught up with Arch Manning and I asked him about the Texas schedule that year, not having Ole Miss and Tennessee on it, and there not being that awkwardness of playing the teams his family happens to root for. Here was what he said.
Kind of good, though, that Ole Miss and Tennessee not on the schedule this year, though, right?
Yeah, that's definitely a plus, I guess. But I want to play them eventually. That could be fun. Big atmospheres.
And so now fast forward 2 years later, and here we are. Texas will indeed be playing both of those schools, and particularly that game against Tennessee in week 4. And so I was able to catch up with Peyton Manning, not for a ton of time, but just kind of asked him his thoughts on who you'd be rooting for in that game. Is it family with your nephew, Arch Manning, or is it your alma mater, your fandom, your school, Tennessee? And keep in mind, it's not like Peyton is a casual. Peyton goes back to Knoxville for football games, basketball games. Every season he's back in Knoxville, wearing the orange, sitting in the press, whether in the box seats or sitting courtside at basketball games. I mean, he is all over the place when it comes to Tennessee, Tennessee games. And so not a crazy question I thought to ask, like, who will you be rooting for? Where does your allegiance lie? Here's what Peyton Manning had to say.
Peyton, Texas going to Knoxville this year. What's that week going to be like in the family group chat?
Yeah, we don't really touch those topics in our family group chat. And so I was asking, one of the kids was asking me earlier, who I was going to go for, and I said, well, who do you think? And of course, he said, that he would go for his school over his relative, and I went, well, you and I are different.
Right.
You and I are wired differently. That nothing's more important than your family, but obviously it's going to be a huge SEC game. My dad dealt with it when I was in college when Tennessee played Ole Miss, and look, I love my university, my alma mater, and pull for them unconditionally. But nothing's more important to me than my family, and when you have a nephew playing, I pull very hard for him every single Saturday. So that's pretty much a no-brainer that you're pulling for your nephew to play well. But like I said, everybody knows pretty strongly where my loyalties lie on all other Saturdays. The University of Tennessee.
So there you have it. Peyton is saying he's rooting for families, rooting for his nephew. Said every other week it will be about the Volunteers, but rooting hard for his nephew Arch Manning. And so it garnered a lot of different responses. Look, this tweet, I tweeted out the video on Friday, and it's blown up. I mean, getting over a 1.5 million views on Twitter and on TikTok and all that. So I thought we'd bring you some of the responses from both Vol fans and Longhorn fans alike. Our buddy John Williams, who does Locked On Sooners, he said T. Martin would never. Thought that was a funny response. Rob Reed's comics said right answer, especially for a young nephew that's looked up to him his whole life. Edward Diamond said Archie and Eli better have a different answer. Tennessee Volatil said going to break the Manning curse by not rooting for us. Glow 32 said he's hoping Arch has a great game, but Tennessee wins out. He's not pulling for Texas to win, just his nephew. I'm okay with that happening. Arch does well, but we still win. Again, he didn't say that. He didn't say, oh yeah, look, I hope Arch has a great game, but I'm Vols through and through. He did not say that in his response. A few other tweets here. I saw one said a no-brainer, family over UT always. Another one said, word, I respect this. Agree with the GOAT. Go Vols. Another guy said the right answer, blood thicker than water. And then there was another guy, 23 MK77, said, I'm a Texas fan. I'd say no way he should cheer against his alma mater. It's his nephew, not his son. That's not the move, Peyton. And then Bob WNYG said he added Eli Manning and said, hey, Eli, who you rooting for when they play Ole Miss? So anyway, it's just an interesting topic that, look, we're just having a little fun with it. I mean, whatever Peyton Manning does on that Saturday is not gonna help or hurt Tennessee or Texas in any way. So it's just kind of a fun one to throw out there. And we were just looking to have some fun with it. But man, people really took off with this thing, and there were some Tennessee fans very upset, saying this is the GOAT. Why are you going to root against us in one of our big games this season? And on the flip side, Longhorn fans saying, hey, Peyton, come on over. We'll give you some Longhorn gear. Come on over and help us root for Arch that day. So it's just going to be a fun game when we get to that, week on the schedule. And again, a very interesting response from Peyton Manning on, rooting for his nephew. Look, they're all the whole Manning family. They're entrenched in rooting for Arch no matter what. They would love nothing more than to see him win the Heisman and win a national championship this year. And I think deep down, Peyton probably knows, look, there will be future years for Tennessee. Tennessee should be a good team this year, maybe playoff hopeful, but it's two young quarterbacks, whether it's Faison Brandon or George McIntyre winning that job. So it's not exactly like we're going into this season as Tennessee is a preseason top 3 team and expected to win the national championship and all that. So maybe the shoe would be on a different foot if that were the scenario here. Whereas it's the opposite of Texas. They are preseason 1 or 2. They are national championship or bust this season. So I get it from that aspect. We did also catch up with a few of the other parties involved. I caught up with Archie Manning, asked him about Peyton and rooting for Arch. Here's what Archie had to say.
Asked Peyton, of course, the Longhorns going to Knoxville this year. I asked Peyton, I said, where's your allegiance go? He said, well, it's always family over, but he said, everybody knows where my heart lies. It's the alma mater, but you dealt with that every time Eli and Peyton each other played in the NFL. And so where do you go on that? It's like Peyton's old school, but Arch is...
people think you have a hard time with that. What do they say? Blood's thicker than water.
Right.
It's like when the Saints played the Colts in the Super Bowl. A lot of people say, "Well, you're torn." You're not torn when your little boy is out there playing. So I hope I love Peyton's years at Tennessee. I still pull for Tennessee, but we'll be hooked on that day.
It is kind of fun, though, with Ole Miss in the fold. You all have your different allegiances now.
Oxford, that'd be tough. Texas goes to LSU. Texas got a tough schedule. But we're proud of Arch, and we're enjoying his days there.
It's amazing too. You raised Peyton and Eli were always so mature, and I see that in Arch, and clearly Cooper's done a great job raising him.
Cooper's done a great job. Arch is I call him a sweet little boy. He's not a little boy anymore, but Arch and I have a great relationship, and I'm very proud of him.
Has he passed you up yet, height-wise?
Oh yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. He's gone past me.
Thanks, Archie.
Thank you.
So that's the great Archie Manning. One other topic that Archie did sound off on was that he thought Arch was unfairly crowned before he even played a snap at Texas. He said, I was kind of disappointed in a lot of the people. He said they kind of crowned him before he ever played, and I just didn't think that was fair. It was a little tough. Played a great team to start, obviously Ohio State. He said, but I've never been more proud of anybody in my life the way Arch battled through what he had to go through last year and the way he played the last 8 or 9 games of the season. And so, it's a great story. And now we get to see Arch come into this season more seasoned with more weapons. Cam Coleman added to the mix is obviously going to be a big addition there for him and the Longhorns. So we'll see how he responds. But did want to bring you, there was a minute we were able to catch up with Arch and some of the media members asking him some questions, talking about playing quarterback at the University of Texas.
What's the most fun for you playing the quarterback position?
Most fun? I think winning is always pretty fun.
And besides the winning, the obvious, right?
Yeah, I think just
where you playing the position.
I think some of the smaller things like the locker room after a big win, or a locker room even after a hard workout, just being with the guys.
Who's on Knoxville in the locker room?
Depends on the day. I was playing some Olivia Dean on Friday. I don't know if the guys liked it that much.
How's it been going up against Muschamps and his defense in practice, and what's it like then having his energy back on the field?
It's been good. He's a really good coach. He's got the defense dialed, so I'm excited to go against him every day in practice, and I'm glad he's on our team.
And then lastly on this topic, I did catch up with Cooper Manning and asked him a kind of an interesting question. Look, the Mannings are all being all-knowing when it comes to football knowledge, right? So, I got to wonder during the season is, in their group chat, is Uncle Peyton or Uncle Eli jumping in with a tidbit for Arch? Hey, don't forget when that running back's open in the flat, make sure you look off the linebacker or whatever, just typical football stuff like that. But Cooper made it known, look, when it comes to talking ball, that's for Coach Steve Sarkisian and the Texas coaching staff, and he's just dad on the other side. He's not talking any kind of football with Arch when it comes to playing football at Texas.
Cooper, your family obviously has a wealth of football knowledge with Arch and getting coached by Sark and all them. How hard is the balance of offering a word of advice and standing clear and saying, hey, let the coaches handle all that?
Oh, that's easy. I'm just dad. I'm a concierge probably for anybody, for kiddos these days. I do not. I think I've been to 2 practices since Arch has been in Texas, and I stay out of that. They're great coaches. And listen to them. That's all that matters. That's why you went there. And when you got kiddo, dado issues, I'll be there. But football is that's all them.
That again, Cooper Manning. Appreciate all those guys, Cooper, Eli, or Cooper, Peyton, and of course Archie and Arch. Again, can't say enough about the Manning Passing Academy. Always a tremendous event. By the way, Kamario Taylor, who we'll have on the show later this week. Expectations rising for him. He was, according to one columnist out there, the most intriguing quarterback he saw this week at the Manning Passing Academy. So we'll get to that a little bit later in the week as the arrow pointed upward, perhaps, for Mississippi State. We'll talk about that later in the week. All right, when we return, some SEC recruiting news we got to get you guys caught up on from the weekend. That is coming your way next. Hey guys, the biggest stage in world soccer, of course, we're in the middle of it, and every match feels like it has the potential for a memorable moment. One goal can completely change the energy of a game, shift momentum, alter the outcome in an instant, and that's what makes tournament soccer so exciting. From the opening whistle to the final kick, and right now the folks at FanDuel are giving fans another reason to stay locked into every match with every goal pays. You bet on a match, and you get bonus bets for every goal scored in that match. More goals means more bonus bets. All you have to do is turn on your token. And look at some of the games happening this week. How about Tuesday night? We will have Mexico versus Ecuador. Now, both those teams have been low scoring so far. What does it look like when they get against each other? Maybe we have some more goals being punched in, and now you get to benefit from each goal scored. From the opening whistle to the final kick, let there be goals over at FanDuel. All you got to do is visit FanDuel.com to get started today. FanDuel.com, let there be goals over at FanDuel. Hey, guys, thank you for making Locked On SEC your first listen of the day. Thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. You can get your daily Locked On SEC fix completely ad-free by joining the Everydayer Club today. Start your 7-day free trial right now and get closer to your favorite conference without the interruptions. Click the link in the show notes or go to lockedonsec.supercast.com to claim your free trial. As we dive back into it, some big recruiting news happening over the weekend, and we have got to start over at Texas A&M as they added the number 6 wide receiver Eric McFarland III to Rivals' number 1 ranked recruiting class. In fact, it's not just Rivals, 24/7 Sports, just about all of them have the Aggies sitting number one. And they add IMG Academy's high-prized receiver prospect Eric McFarland on Sunday evening. The blue chipper choosing to play for Mike Elko and the Aggies over his other finalists, Georgia and Florida. Other programs he considered, Ohio State, USC. The Rivals industry ranking has him as the number 6 wide receiver, number 37 overall prospect, and just adds to an A&M class that is already absolutely loaded. Now, McFarland is 5'8", 176 pounds, a little bit small, but he is fast. Everybody you talk about with him is he is just very fast, blazing speed. And McFarland telling Rivals what stands out about A&M is just the plan they have for me, how they treat me, and how hard they recruited me. Of course, new offense coordinator Holman Wiggins. We're going to see what he looks like in calling plays with Colin Klein now out. And going to be very interesting to see all these new pieces, this year and then next year. Keep in mind, he's a 2027 recruit. So this is all guys that are coming in, not this season, next year. But got to think a lot of these guys will be early enrollees and wanting to get onto campus and playing very early. But ESPN, they rank McFarland as a 5-star recruit. On 3, Rivals and 24/7 all have him as a very high 4-star recruit. But the Aggies just have quite a ridiculous 2027 signing class so far. Already includes 6 5-star commits. Again, depending on what service you look for, this, on some of the services, this is their 7th 5-star in this class. So absolutely crazy. Of course, the big question will be, can they keep these kids to, when signing day comes later this year? And even if they do sign them for the 2027 class, are they still around come 2028 and 2029? Well, we'll certainly be tracking that Protect College Sports Act. If we do end up getting past what a lot of people are pushing for that one-time transfer rule, it could end up helping recruiting tremendously. And I'm sure Mike Elko and his staff are really, really hoping that happens, saying, yeah, let's get these kids into the 2027 recruiting class, and we'll keep them on campus for years to come. Because as we know, what's happened in the past is you get a big 4 or 5-star recruit, he comes on campus his freshman year, and then a lot of times they hit the transfer portal and they're going elsewhere. So we'll see what happens on that front with A&M, but they are absolutely crushing it. How about over at Ole Miss? Pete Golding beating out several other teams for a 4-star wide receiver out of the state of Texas. Alvin Mosley committing to the Ole Miss Rebels. He is out of Rasherin, Texas, just outside Houston, listed at 6'2", 190 pounds. The 24/7 Sports Composite has him rated a 4-star, the number 26 wide receiver, the number 31 player from the state of Texas, and the number 190 overall prospect in 2027. He had offers from Florida State, Kentucky, LSU, Tennessee, Vanderbilt, Texas Tech, and made his big announcement on Saturday. Had his finalists as Ole Miss, Arkansas, Texas, and Houston. And so his commitment gives Ole Miss 19 verbal commitments and currently sitting top 20, depending on what service you look at, top 20 in just about every recruiting service out there. How about Steve Sarkisian, Texas? They continue to crush. They landed a 4-star in-state corner. Montre Jackson, the newest Longhorn commitment. He is out of Garland, Texas. He is listed at 6'1", 185 pounds. Rated a 4-star prospect, the number 27 corner, the number 36 player in the state of Texas, the number 223 overall prospect. And again, had offers from everybody: Arkansas, Oklahoma, LSU, A&M. And narrowed things down to Texas, Ole Miss, and SMU. And while the SMU campus, very close to his home, he chose to head down the road to Austin and come play in the SEC. But that gives Texas now 20 verbals and a top 5 Texas class currently for 2027. Longhorns really doing some work here these last couple of weeks. How about Alabama? They finally got a big-time wide receiver into their class. A 4-star receiver, Osani Gales, committing over the weekend to Alabama, chose the Tide over Stanford and Washington. Also had offers from Ohio State, among others. He is the number 46 overall player, the number 8 receiver in the nation. So this is a big-time get. We crushed Alabama last week for the slow recruiting for 2027. This is a big get, and immediately becomes one of their highest-ranked recruits for 2027, along with their 5-star quarterback, Elijah Haven. Puts the Tide up to 13 commits for this cycle, but still a lot of ground to make up if they want to climb up those recruiting rankings. Now, I saw some Alabama fans make an argument, well, we focused on retention. We got a lot of guys on this roster that are going to be back next year. So, Kalen DeBoer said this is going to be a small recruiting class anyway. I get it, but still, it's never an excuse to not sign 4 or 5 stars. You never go pass. We're going to pass on those 4-star, 5-star recruits. We're building, we got guys coming back next year. Everybody's got guys coming back next year. You still want to sign those big time recruits every year in the recruiting class. Interesting tidbit yesterday. I saw a quarterback for the class at 2028, Kingston Preyer, I guess is how you'd say, Preyear. He's from Montgomery, Alabama. He's rated the number 44 overall player and the number 4 quarterback in that class. He will make his commitment on July 10th. He is down to Alabama, Florida, and Vanderbilt. And there are a lot of people saying he's leaning Alabama. Now, what makes this very interesting is Alabama already, they have Austin Mack right now. They have Keelan Russell. Keelan Russell is just coming off of his true freshman year. He's still got several years to go. In the class of 2027, they have Elijah Haven, the top quarterback, the number 3 overall player, in that class. And then they also have an in-state product in Trent Seaborn, who's number 16. So you've got that going on, and then you're going to add another quarterback for 2028. Again, it just feels like Alabama's loading up on the quarterback room, and I think some fans asking, what about the rest of the roster? We need O-linemen, we need D-linemen, we need corners, we need all this. So just kind of interesting dynamic. We'll see what happens there. And then lastly, South Carolina, they picked up a 3-star linebacker in Jackson Ross, an in-state recruit, the number 13 player from the state, the number 51 linebacker overall in the composite. All right, still more to come here on Locked On SEC, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, covering your team every day. All right, roll along here, Locked On SEC. Just a reminder, later in the week, make sure you come back and check out some of those great interviews we're going to have from the Manning Passing Academy. Again, conversations. We got one-on-one with Trinidad Chambliss, John Mateer, Kenny Minchie, Kamario Taylor, among others. So don't want to miss that. All right, a couple SEC hoops nuggets on the way out of here today. How about Todd Golden downplaying NBA interests? We just saw Dusty May, the Michigan head coach, leave college and jump to the pros to go be the head coach for the Dallas Mavericks. Well, in late April, Todd Golden's name came up in the NBA rumor mill when it was talked about that Steve Kerr could potentially leave the Golden State Warriors and that maybe the Warriors would target Todd Golden. Well, Kerr decided it wasn't the time to end his Golden State tenure, agreed to a new 2-year deal there. And shortly after that initial report from Kevin O'Connor, Golden addressed the speculation saying, I plan to coach the Gators next season. Well, Florida fans were relieved that Golden wasn't looking to make the jump this offseason. There have been some that wonder, okay, with Dusty May leaving, if Todd Golden continues to have success at Florida, could he potentially jump down the road? Well, he recently spoke to On3 Sports when asked about Dusty May making the jump from college to the NBA. Todd Golden telling Joe Tipton, quote, I am going to enjoy being at Florida for a while, adding he is in a, quote, really good spot at Florida. Of course, came over to Florida in 2022, has a 103-41 record, 3 consecutive NCAA tournament appearances, of course, led Florida to the 2025 National Championship, their title in program history. And guess what? They are expected to be loaded again this year. We haven't talked enough probably about Thomas Houck and Alex Condon and Ruben Chinyalu and Boogie Flan, all these pieces coming back. The Gators have a great schedule as well. We know the SEC schedule's loaded, but they're also set to play Miami, Notre Dame, could also play Houston or Rutgers or Auburn, Kansas, UNLV. They're playing in that Players Era tournament. And then they also had that big game with Duke at home on December 1st. So it's an incredible schedule for Florida. They're going to be one of the preseason top 5 teams, may even be preseason number 1 with everything they bring back. But Todd Golden has retained 81.8% of their scoring from last season. And again, it was disappointing in how it ended, but they're going to be loaded and back with a vengeance. And so they kick off their season. Crazy to think, we're turning the schedule to July this week. Monday, November 2nd, Florida will open the season in Tampa against the Hurricanes in a neutral site contest. So July to August, September, October, November. I mean, we're 4 months away from basketball season tipping off. All right, one more tidbit before we get out of here. John Calipari pushing an idea that our buddy Nick Roush over at Kentucky Sports Radio thinks is the worst idea in college basketball. Here's what Nick wrote about over at On3. He said, 10 years ago, John Calipari made a terrible proposal. He had just come off a 38-1 season at the time that ended in the Final Four. And when you have that much cachet, you can kind of say whatever. Well, now that a decade has passed, he's still ready to bring this terrible idea back to the general public. He said, what is this terrible proposal? He wants to make the postseason SEC tournament a preseason SEC tournament. Cal said during the SEC spring meetings before the season, as the season gets started, the first thing that happens is the SEC tournament. Everybody gets to play 3 games, and the final teams get to play 4 games. And at the end, you can move your season back, and then you don't have to play 3 games in a week or go to the NCAA tournament. Nick cited a bunch of different reasons why this is just not a good idea. He said, look, the whole idea of if you want to be the man, you got to beat the man. He said college basketball teams are still figuring out each other in November. One could look completely different 4 months later when they're amping up for the NCAA tournament. After months of conference play, the SEC tournament is a true test of who's the best of the best and who's hot going into the postseason tournament. So really funny piece, though, from Nick, though, as he said, simply put, John Calipari has a terrible idea, one that did not gain any traction in 2016 and will not gain any traction in 2026. So found that pretty funny. All right, thank you guys for tuning into today's Locked On SEC. Make sure you subscribe and follow so you get all the latest episodes. And if you never miss an episode, the Everydayer Club is built for you. Get Locked On SEC ad-free, plus members-only Discord access and more. Head to lockedonsec.supercast.com to join the club. For those of you on video, we send you to the first ever 24/7 national Locked On Podcast Network YouTube channel. And on audio, make sure you make your second listen, Locked On College Football. I'm Chris Gordy. This has been Locked On SEC.